Welcome to Talk to Brazil with Tom Reaoch, the business connector to business in Brazil. Welcome to Talk to Brazil, the business connection, a leading business podcast talking about business in the world. I'm Tom Reaoch, an American from Pittsburgh, living in Brazil, known as the king of networking and talking from my podcast studio in Campinas, São Paulo. Today's guest is Talaya Dendy, and she's joining us from Las Vegas in the United States. Talaya Dendy is a cancer doula, cancer thriver, cancer health equity consultant, mental health first aider, and podcaster who has dedicated her career to advocating for, guiding, supporting, and empowering people diagnosed with cancer. Talaya and I met on PodMatch Podcast matching platform, and Talaya hosts the Navigating Cancer Together podcast. And she had me as a guest where we discussed my own breast cancer journey. So with that, Talaya, welcome to Talk to Brazil Business Connection.
Thank you so much, Tom. I appreciate it. I'm honored to be here to talk with you today.
Well, the honor's mine, actually, because I've been your guest. We had a great discussion about cancer and all of the aspects of the journey. And we've had a similar journey in different places of the world, right?
Yes,
and Talaya,
absolutely.
You too have been a guest, not only a guest on numerous podcasts, but the Authority magazine and the Thrive Global featured you as an authority in the interview series, I Survived Cancer, and Here is How I Did It.
Yes.
So you cover that pretty much in your podcast of how everybody has done it. But two things I learned as a survivor. One, no two cancer stories are equal. And two, we need an ally or allies in the journey. Do you agree?
You know, Tom, I agree 100%. It is so important for people to understand that, you know, some things are similar as far as like the emotional piece of it. But again, the process that people go through, the side effects, all of that, that can be different from one person to the next. And it is critical to have an ally. You must have one because it's not something that you would like to do alone. It's very tough. And so I cannot agree more with you, Tom.
But how do you manage? Because you've assumed this now as a profession. So you really help others in their journey.
Absolutely.
That, besides being a large responsibility, what's the emotional impact on you?
You know, Tom, early on, I had to have certain things in place for myself as far as self-care. That includes meditation, that includes exercise, making sure I get out in nature. It's making sure I get enough sleep. You know, if my sleep is not up to par, I can tell right away that I could be easily emotionally impacted because by nature, I am an empath. And so right out of the gate, I had to establish certain things to take care of myself first so that I could be the best for the people that I serve.
Well, during that journey, when you were having your personal challenges, did you have someone help you?
Oh, yes. My mom was instrumental in my healing, my care, everything. She was there for me. You know, she cooked. If I wanted her to clean, she cleaned. I'm one of those people where I guess some people would say I'm OCD. So cleaning when I could actually felt good to me. It helped to clear my mind. It helped to keep me active. But my mom went to basically all of my chemotherapy infusions with me. My brother was part of, you know, my team as well. So, and also I had a really great oncologist, and that made a world of difference also.
Now, to that, to the family, to friends, and today what you do as a profession, sometimes you have to help the helpers, don't you?
Absolutely, because a lot of times there's a communication gap between the person who is in need of care and the caregiver. And that can create tension. And it's not intended. I think what I found, Tom, is that most people who are diagnosed with cancer, they don't want to be a burden on other people. They don't like to share the harsh details of what they may be going through or feeling. And so they kind of hold back. And then for the caregiver, they're not sure what's going on, how they can help. Mm-hmm. And so then that creates stress for them. And so they're playing this guessing game.
And there's a little bit of guilt on both sides, right?
Absolutely. Definitely. There's that guilt piece. The person who has cancer feels like, again, they're a burden. And the caregiver typically it's a loved one or a friend. So of course you don't want to see your friend or loved one going through something like that. And so a lot of times the caregiver takes that on as well.
Well, I think that's a part, because I can remember my journey. There were times when I really didn't want to talk. And I really didn't want to hear anybody talking. Because sometimes you just feel stressed out. I felt depressed at times. And, everybody, the first thing that says, well, how do you feel? There were days I just felt rotten. And you just don't want to come out and say, well, I feel rotten. Because then everybody wants to, try to pep you up and dance and sing songs or whatever. And sometimes you don't need that.
Right. And Tom, I agree with you. I've had a lot of those days, especially towards the end, because, the cancer treatment is cumulative. So by the end of it, you're just done. And so I had to do radiation in addition to chemotherapy. So one thing that I learned to do was to just say to my family and friends, I need some time. I need some time. It's not personal. I just need some time. And when I started saying that, they understood what I was really saying. And it wasn't me being rude or, not being social or whatever. They understood that, she's in a place where she just needs to recoup, I guess.
Well, that I can understand that when you were one of the moving pieces.
Yes.
But today, as you help two other moving pieces, you're not the moving piece anymore. It's the person with cancer. It might be the caregiver. It might be a third party. How do you adjust all of that?
It's constant, and it's different for everyone. And so what I do is when I work with people initially, I like to know who is going to be there to support them. And sometimes it's no one. And if there is someone, I ask them to give me a little bit of information, whatever they're willing to share about those people that will be there for them and be a part of their care team. And so, and then what I do is I say, do you mind if I have like a 30-minute call with them? Just to discuss, what they're seeing. And I'm very upfront. I say, to discuss what they're seeing as what your needs are and what they think that you're struggling with. Because sometimes what we think and what other people see are totally different. Right. And so it's being able to bring the two together so that the person in need can get the care. And then the person who's given the care can feel like, hey, I'm doing the best that I can for this person, and I'm meeting their needs.
Well, it's both. I think sometimes bringing them together and other times getting them apart.
True. Yes, very true. It's tough. It's a constant balancing act and a juggle. One thing that I have found is that the patient or the person in need of care is more open to talking to me about those dark things, and so the caregiver is left in the dark. But I reassure the caregiver and I say, it's nothing personal. It's just easier to share certain things with someone who's been through something similar. And so then they understand and say, okay, I can accept that. I just want to make sure that someone is supporting them.
Well, I think what you just said is a very important part, that if people realize, and the person with cancer, once they realize that you have been on that journey and you have been there, I think you start a whole different sense of trust.
Yes.
Many caregivers have not been there. They might have, but many times they haven't.
They haven't.
And that's a difference.
Absolutely. That's a huge difference, Tom. And I think that's where a lot of the frustration and breakdown in the communication comes in, because the one person is trying to, in a sense, communicate or even show. They may not know how to communicate it, but they're trying to show that, hey, this is what I'm struggling with. This is what I'm dealing with. And the person who hasn't been through it, they're like, well, why don't you just stay positive? Why don't you just, but they don't understand. It's not that simple.
Right. And is there a difference between men and women, have you found?
Tom, I'm going to be honest. I have yet to work with a man. Men simply do not request my help.
I would think honest. That. I could see that. I'm asking you because of that. I think I was pretty, refractory. I had an ally when I had cancer, and it was actually a woman friend. And since I had breast cancer, I wanted to reach out with somebody we knew who had breast cancer. And she was a great help. But I can see that men, in any sense, don't want to open up about anything. And
no, it's tough.
Generally would not want to open up to a woman about anything. Many times they don't. I didn't open up to my wife.
Oh, wow. Yes. See, you're a great example,
I'm not the best example, but that's the way it was.
Yeah. But it goes to my point of, it's easier to talk to someone who's been through it,
But unfortunately, too, more women in the world, that's in Brazil and I think in the States and probably worldwide, more women suffer from cancer than men.
Yes, true. That is true. And it's very unfortunate. And of course, I don't have the answers for that, but I think a lot of it has to do with, carrying a lot of trauma, carrying a lot of pain and things like that. Not to say that men don't have a lot of responsibility, because we all do in this day and age, but women are the primary focal point and primary caregivers for everyone.
Right.
And so a lot of times she puts herself last. And so I think that's part of it too.
And I've seen that because here I share some of my time helping different organizations, as you do with cancer awareness. And many times we find these, when we're talking specifically about cancer with children, and really the caregiver is the mother, maybe a grandmother, maybe an aunt. It's generally a woman. I wouldn't say it isn't ever a man. Again, it's the maternal part of, I guess, protecting the continuity of life that's there. And so women, I think, suffer more, but also see more suffering.
I agree with that, Tom. And, a lot of times on the caregiver side, I've heard of instances where women have been married and the husband left because they had to have, say, a breast remove, or they had to have a hysterectomy or some type of, major surgery like that, or simply the fact that they have cancer and their partner, their spouse has left them. And so they have that to deal with on top of everything else.
Well, unfortunately, that's pretty much the way it is here in Brazil. I've seen that because even through my own chemotherapy sessions and radiation sessions, most of my colleagues were women. And women tend to share their stories. And maybe not directly, but indirectly, that came out of women being abandoned by their spouse because of that. And I went through that myself when I had my cancer surgery for the breast cancer. And my doctor asked me if I wanted an implant. And I thought that was funny. I thought he was joking with me. But afterwards, I realized how important that point is for a woman.
Yes, and it's critical.
Also, it's for self-esteem. But many times, the man or a person close just abandons the woman because of that. And that's devastating.
It's very devastating, especially during a time like that. And then it really makes you evaluate the relationship itself, or what you thought was a relationship, because that's the worst time to leave someone. And sometimes it's simply the fact that, the man just can't deal with it. There's fear involved. They don't want to see their wife or their partner suffering. And I'm not making excuses, because it's definitely not right. Or they feel like their partner is no longer fully a woman or,
Right.
Desirable. It's so many different factors.
And I think maybe sometimes it's all that together.
Yes,
But
absolutely.
anyway, it's sad that it happens. Uh,
Yes.
but back to you and what you do. You have a very calm, soothing voice. Did you practice that? Is that something? Because I think that's an advantage that you have.
Tom, if I had $1 for every time someone said that to me, I'd be rich, first of all. I haven't practiced it. I think that's just a gift that, I was given from God. Everybody says that. And it's interesting because sometimes we don't see ourselves or hear ourselves the way other people do.
Right.
So every time I hear that, it just makes me feel good because that is something that's really needed when you are supporting someone with cancer. And so that further lets me know that I'm on the right track with the business that I've decided to start and the work that I'm doing.
Well, it fits perfectly because as you've become a podcast host,
Mhm.
and podcasting, basically what I do and the way I do it, we're talking about voice,
Yeah.
and more voice is important.
Hmm.
And recently I
Absolutely.
saw an article I posted even on LinkedIn about listening to a podcast before bed is soothing.
Yes. Funny, Tom, I listen to different podcasts when I'm winding down for the day. Hmm.
Now what that was, but I could see now, I could hear listening to you or someone who has a voice like yours that could be soothing. And I don't know if what
Yeah.
that because sometimes you hear something that's so boring that you go to sleep. But when we're suffering, when we're in that challenge, sometimes what we need, and I felt I needed, was just less stimulus.
Yes.
Because
Absolutely.
when we were going through chemotherapy, my body was just overstimulated. I couldn't. I wanted to get outside of my body.
Hmm. I can relate. And you know what I did for that? Because I experienced that too. What I did for that was I created a healing journal. Excuse me. And what it is really are different healing scriptures from the Bible.
Hmm.
And I would just, excuse me, every day read through those, before I started my day. And it would just put me in this calmer state right away during the day. And even though, things came up throughout the day, if I had appointments, if I had to go into chemo,
Hmm.
it really didn't affect me as much as it normally would have because I've kind of set the tone for the day. And I actually still have it. I would carry it around with me. It may sound weird, but when I felt like overstimulated and I started to feel some anxiety or something to, start to pop up,
Hmm.
I just find one of those scriptures and I'm like, okay, let's recenter.
Bring it back.
But yes, bring it
And
back.
when you mentioned meditation, did that also help bring
Oh my
yourself
gosh.
together?
Yes, it did. You talk about wanting to get out of your body. That was a way for me to do that with meditation. It's just, and it doesn't take a lot of time. You could
Hmm.
do it for a minute or so. And it's a way to just kind of calm the nervous system and just say, okay, it's going to be okay. Let's just bring it down a couple of notches. It'll be fine.
Sometimes a lot of notches there, but
A lot of notches. So true.
no. But I think in that and during that journey, we need something. A
Yeah,
notch at a time is a notch gained.
that's
So
right.
sometimes I was to a point when I said I want to get out of my body, I really did. I really said,
Yeah.
I don't fit here anymore, and I don't want to fit.
Hmm.
And so when you put it all together, depression and everything else, uh,
Yeah.
you know, they talk about anxiety, anger against a caregiver who comes in smiling and you don't want to see a smile.
Yeah, you're like, what is there to smile about?
Yeah,
Yes, I get it. We've all been there. Yeah. And, I think that's why it's so important to have that person who has been through something similar. It doesn't necessarily have to be cancer,
mm-hmm.
it could be any, major illness or chronic illness that one has gone through because there's that way to make a connection.
Mm-hmm.
And that's important is having the ability to make that connection. And I think that's how the person with cancer gets the most out of the support that they need, is having someone they can connect with. And it's ongoing. It just doesn't stop when the treatment is done. Right. It goes on into survivorship. It's just a different form of support that's needed. Because a lot of times, including myself, after the treatment, you're like, I don't know what to do with myself now.
Right.
And things become...
Well, we came to that, and I guess you came to that. That would be a question I would ask. What made you start what you're doing? Because you've come from a corporate world, a business world, as you mentioned, your previous life.
Yeah.
We have another life. We were given another life, I think. So where did that click, or how did it click, and how did you decide to do what you're doing?
Well, Tom, it was definitely a journey that started before I even knew I had cancer, and was in corporate America doing supply chain. I was a supply chain analyst, utilizing my degree in math and science. And I'm like, okay, this is cool. I get to work with engineers and support them and, be a part of products being manufactured and things like that. And at first it was great. And I would say further into my career, it just became tiring. It became stressful. There were long hours, and just trying to climb that corporate ladder as a Black woman, as a woman, period. And sometimes I would be in these environments that were kind of hostile. And
you use kind of loosely.
Yeah.
Sometimes openly
they were
hostile.
There you go, Tom. Openly hostile. And I knew that was contributing to a major part of my stress, going into these spaces where I felt like I couldn't be 100% myself. And so when I was diagnosed with cancer, that's when it really became clear to me, further into my cancer journey, that this is probably not the right career for me anymore. Because it was playing a part in my health. I was stressed out. I wasn't happy very much later in my career. And so I said, maybe I'm supposed to support other people, because there was a woman I was working with, and she just happened to confide in me that she had received a cancer diagnosis. And I said, oh, what made you tell me? Because she said, please don't say anything. I haven't shared this with anyone else. Right. She said, I just felt like I could say something to you. And I said, you're not going to believe this, but I actually had cancer before. How can I help you? What questions do you have? And so I answered her questions throughout her cancer experience. We ended up with the same oncologist. We didn't even know until later on. I didn't even know this until later on in her cancer journey. She shared with me who her oncologist was. I said, I had the same one. And I said, it was meant for you to talk with me. And after she finished treatment, she said, Talaya, you just don't know how much you've helped me. It meant so much. Everything that you said helped prepare me, and it actually happened. So once she finished her treatment, she sent me this really nice gift. And I said, maybe this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And then my oncologist would give me feedback and say, Talaya, the way that you're handling this, it's so well. You're always so calm, and you come in and you have your notes and you have your questions. And I'm like, okay. And so I'm
and
like,
you have this
I
voice,
hear you.
right? You have this calm voice.
Yeah. And so corporate America wasn't looking so good anymore, but I had to go back to, for a period to, help pay off some medical bills and things like that, and keep my insurance so that, I could continue to get the follow-up scans or whatever else I needed after. But during that time, Tom, I was putting together a plan. Okay, I know I want to do my own business. I know I'm just not sure. Is it this? So while still in corporate America, I entered into a coaching course, and I said, okay, I'll work on this, and I'll get my coaching certification. And so I remember it was the end of November 2018. I resigned, and the next day got on a plane and went to Orlando and finalized my coaching certification, because you had to do in person. Beginning of 2019 is when I said, I'm just going to go all in and see what happens. Now, it hasn't been easy. There's a lot of learning. As far as business, and it's something a lot of people have not heard of.
Right.
And so there's me learning the business piece. There's educating the people I'd like to support. There's creating that awareness. Right. And so it takes time for all of those things to come together. But long story short, that's how I ended up where I'm at today, because my purpose was revealed to me. I have been seeking it, all that time.
I've seen and I've spoken with hundreds of people in my podcasts. And starting a business is not easy in any sense, nor is it easy anywhere. But one of the things that I do see that's important, and it reminds me of my cancer journey, is one of the things that my doctor said to me on the first day that we spoke was, just do what you like. And many people are in business and they don't like what they're in, or they start a business and they don't like it. Part of success, I think, in a business, if you really like it, it shows. And it's not easy.
It's not easy.
So if we said that the cure to cancer is in your head, the success to your business is in your head, and doing what you like is part of the process. And as you said previously, you were doing things that you probably didn't satisfy you.
Yeah.
And so you're doing something. It's a different challenge, but in that you're helping more people who have the same challenge, who have the same problems, and will probably come out the other side. Many of the people that I met, my colleagues, my chemo colleagues, as I call them, they come out and they start businesses.
Yeah.
First because they need to. Maybe their spouse left them. It's a different challenge, but it's a learning process. They restart, they reboot, and that's healing, I think. So I want to commend you on what you're doing, because there are so many out there. But in any business, what we need to do, and I hope I can help you do that, marketing is a key to success. People have to know what you're offering. They need to know you, what you're about, why you're about it, what the outcome is, where your success is, and who you can help. Because what you do is unique. Like we just said, every cancer journey is different.
Yes.
And I'm sure everybody who can coach is different. So
Absolutely.
you have to sell what makes you different.
That's right.
My tip.
That's a great tip. And that's part of the process too, is not getting caught up in all the hype that you see on social media and, oh, this person is doing it that way and they're having success. Is finding what works for you and truly represents who you are. And I think sometimes by human nature, we get concerned that, we're going to weed out these people, or this particular group isn't going to like me for whatever reason. And, that's not what it's about. No. Because the people that you're supposed to work with, those are the people you're going to reach. And so I just feel like you have to be your authentic self. And that's one thing that I wasn't able to do in corporate America that really drives me. Now it's like, hey, I can show up as Talaya. I can just, if I stumble on a word, it's not the end of the world. And, if I miss a deadline, I won't, get fired or whatever, because I'm the boss. So, yeah. And then also just being able to help people in the way that comes from within, It's a process, I think. All these organizations have procedures and processes.
Right.
Well, my procedure and process comes from within. and it's easy to document because it is authentic, and it's going to be different for every person. So I think that it's important to just bring your true self. And that goes for people that I support as well. It's like, don't feel like you can't share certain things with me because you're going to be judged. No, this is a place want you to feel safe, right, and get those things off your chest, because that's going to help you heal.
Well, my only other tip to you would be if you can your voice and sell that as a soothing remedy, I'd think about that. But I think you've taken the steps with your podcast. So, Talaya, I want to thank you. We're coming to the end of our time. I want to thank you again, congratulate you on what you're doing.
Thank you.
I think, I know how important it is to the people that you help.
Thank you, Tom. It's been a pleasure, and I appreciate you having me.
So how can our listeners find you?
Yes, Tom, they can find me, first of all, on my website, and that is ontheotherside.life. On the Other Side is one word, and .life. That's one place. Mm-hmm. They can find my podcast, Navigating Cancer Together. They can find it on Anchor, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. The major podcast platforms is where they can find that. And then also LinkedIn. Right. And then Instagram under On the Other Side 17. Very good. And on LinkedIn, for our listeners, it's Talaya Dendy. And that's Talaya, and the last name is Dendy, correct? That is correct, Tom. So Talaya Dendy on LinkedIn, and it's on anchor.fm, Navigating Cancer Together. Yes. Which is where I was interviewed. I want to thank you for that. So thank you for being a guest, Tom. It was such a pleasure. No, it's my pleasure, and congratulations what you do again. Success. And I'm sure we're going to be speaking in the future, all right? Thank you, Tom. Okay. Take care and bye-bye. Take care. Bye-bye. And for our listeners again, you can find her on LinkedIn. It's Talaya Dendy. And I'd like to thank our audience and our sponsor, Focus MI Market Intelligence. Focus MI specializes in market research for the Brazilian agricultural market. More about them on their site, www.focusmi.com. All Talk to Brazil podcast shows can be found on major platforms: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, TuneIn, Amazon, JioSaavn, YouTube, and many others. Remember, when you talk to Tom, you talk to Brazil and the world. Goodbye, and thanks for listening. Thanks for listening to Tom Reaoch on Talk to Brazil, the business connector to Brazil.